Hello, everyone. So today I'm going to be sharing with you my presentation on Memphis, Martin, and the Mountaintop. So here we have my cover page, and here's a photo of the book. So my thesis statement is Memphis, Martin, and the Mountaintop challenges the traditional narrative of civil rights history in children's literature by emphasizing the intersection of racial and labor justice. Through its portrayal of collective struggle and working class activism, the book aligns with the legacy of leftist children's literature, which has long sought to engage young readers with themes of economic justice, solidarity, and grassroots resistance. So this photo here is a photo that I took at the Civil Rights Museum at the old Lorraine Motel in Memphis, Tennessee. And this is some of the um, protest posters that some of the men who were striking were using. They held up posters that said, "I am a man." So, a summary of this book is Memphis Martin and the Mountaintop is a historical children's book that tells the story of the 1968 Memphis sanitation workers' strike through the eyes of a young girl whose father is a striking worker. It captures the struggles of Black sanitation workers fighting for fair wages and better working conditions, as well as the role of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. in supporting the movement. This book highlights themes of resilience, community, and social justice, making history accessible to young readers. So, what is leftist children's literature? What can you look for to classify it as that? So, it will often have themes of economic justice and labor rights and highlights stories of struggling workers and the importance of fair labor practices. It will also often have some anti-fascism and political awareness messages, um, as it's going to navigate and encourage vigilant hypervigilance against authoritarianism and promote democratic principles. It will also have themes of gender equality and social equality, ta tales that question traditional gender roles and advocate for equal rights. There will be possibly some themes of environmental consciousness, works that foster an appreciation for nature and emphasize ecological responsibility. Some of the historical context on leftist children's literature is that during periods such as the Cold War, leftist authors utilized children's literature to subtly counteract prevailing conservative narratives, embedding progressive ideals within engaging stories that are going to be interesting and fun for children. This approach provided an avenue to discuss complex social issues in an accessible manner. Labor and collective struggle in Memphis Martin and the Mountaintop. So, one of these themes in Memphis Martin and the Mountaintop, which makes it, in my opinion, a work of leftist children's literature. Memphis Martin and the Mountaintop challenges the dominant narrative of the civil rights movement by centering working class activism rather than focusing solely on legal or political victories. This book aligns with a tradition of leftist children's literature that highlights economic struggle, labor organizing, and solidarity as essential to tools for change. Like many radical children's books, it moves beyond individual heroism, i.e., just like MLK alone, to emphasize collective power and grassroots resistance. This is a quote from Learning from the Left by Julia L. Mickenberg. Radical children's literature disputes dominant culture myths by presenting history from a perspective of workers, activists, and marginalized communities rather than the ruling elite. Leftist themes in the book include labor rights as civil rights. The sanitation workers strike was a fight not just for racial justice, but for economic dignity and workers' rights, a major theme in leftist children's literature. The book frames labor as a site of struggle, showing how economic exploitation and racial discrimination intersect. And here are some more themes within this. Um, the power of collective action. The sanitation workers, through poorly paid and lacking political power, win their demands through solidarity and mass action, a classic leftist theme. The book teaches young readers that change happens when ordinary people organize together, reinforcing the importance of unions and direct action. Challenging authority and capitalism, Mayor Henry Loeb and the city government represent the entrenched power structures that resist worker empowerment, a reoccurring theme in leftist children's books. The book implicitly critiques capitalist exploitation, showing how the city's refusal to recognize the union was a way to maintain economic and racial hierarchies. MLK's presence in the book highlights how the Memphis strike was part of his larger Poor People's Campaign, which sought to unite Black and white workers against economic injustice. Like many radical children's books, Memphis Martin and the Mountaintop encourages young readers to see history as a living struggle and one that continues on today. This is a video of MLK's Mountaintop speech that you can find on YouTube. So, about the author, Alice Faye Duncan, I have a link to her website right here. And about her, she was a graduate from the University of Memphis, where I'm currently a student, and she has written many, many award-winning books. Multiple have won the Coretta Scott King Award. Um, and she is just a all-around amazing author, amazing person, and really cares about the children of her community as she is a librarian. Um, and the illustrator for this book was also award-winning for his illustrations. His books often focus on Black history and culture, as do Alice Faye Duncan's. Now, I did conduct an interview with Alice Faye Duncan, um, and these are some of the questions and the answers that she gave for this interview. Um, Memphis Martin on the Mountaintop highlights the intersection of labor and racial justice. Why do you think this aspect of Dr. King's activism is often overlooked? And Miss Duncan says this. It is my opinion that Dr. King turning his attention to economics with the Poor People's Campaign is possibly the initiative that got him killed. With the Poor People's Campaign, he was presenting to march on Washington with thousands of poor people from all races, religions, and corners of the nation to prove that the richest country in the world was neglect supporting the working poor. The working poor were people like the Memphis sanitation workers, folks working full time but making starvation wages. Essentially, King was going to march on Washington in May 1968 to encourage the American government to establish a living wage. He was killed before that happened. The question comes to me, why was he killed prior to the campaign descending on Washington? My answer is that he was coming for the money, in the name of every American making substandard pay. So perhaps his labor initiative is not highlighted in American history because people will see clearly he was assassinated for economic justice. 50 years later, there's still no federal living wage in America, and maybe that is the point. Powers that be powers that be did and do not want one. Next, I asked her, how do you see the legacy of the Memphis sanitation strike reflected in today's labor movements? She says, the legacy of the Memphis sanitation workers is ever present, sorry. You witness their inspection and the determination of Starbucks, Amazon, HarperCollins publishing workers who are determined to organize and bargain for working rights. You have seen the men's legacy right here during the recent Kellogg strike in Memphis. Next, I ask her, what message do you hope young readers take away about activism and collective struggle? When reading my book, Memphis, Martin, and the Mountaintop, I hope readers understand that liberation is an ongoing battle that requires sacrifice of many people working together. Behind the sanitation workers were a host of wives, children, churches, and multiple religious groups boycotting and marching to highlight labor injustice. Freedom does not happen with one voice and one man. Freedom and democracy is to survive. Everybody and their neighbor gotta put feet in the fire. Some people argue that children's literature should avoid political or radical themes. What is your response to that? She says if children are not aware of the nation's past and mistakes and misdeeds, children will repeat that history. I next ask her, how do you see your book fitting into the tradition of leftist or activist children's literature? Now, her answer to this is interesting because it is kind of working against my thesis statement, but I think that you can interpret literature as you read it. Um, and I think that she's valid in saying that she does not agree that this book is leftist or as a protest book, that she's coming at it from a angle of just, stating the history that happened. But I think it can be seen by different people differently, if that makes sense. But she does answer, my book is not leftist or written as a protest book. I recorded history as it happened using lyrical language for the purpose of educating and inspiring readers to be righteous. Next, I asked her, have you faced any pushback from schools or parents regarding the themes of the book? If so, how do you respond? She says, Duval County in Florida did not use my book in its schools. Here's the article. Feel free to share it widely. Next, I asked Miss Duncan, as a children's author, how do you balance telling difficult histories while making them accessible to young readers? She says, when writing about hard lessons concerning injustice like American slavery or death like the assassination of Dr. King, I temper the information by using poetry or lyrical language as music is pleasing to the ear and heart. I approach writing books on such topics like writing a sad love song. Everybody loves a sad love song. In the spirit of an oxymoron, the book's topic might be sad, but the revelation of knowledge and understanding feels good, liberating, and inspiring. Next, I ask her, are there any other historical moments or figures you'd love to explore in future books? And she says, I want to write about Dr. King's father, Daddy King, MLK Sir, who has gone unexplored in children's literature. Daddy King is the king who shaped Martin to be a champion for freedom. It wasn't Gandhi. Gandhi gave Martin a model for social action. What advice do you have for young writers, particularly those interested in writing history and activism? And she says, the book that you want to read is the book you must write. Get busy. Next, I ask her, why did you choose this story? Why did you choose to tell this story through the perspective of a child? And she says children like to read about other children. That makes sense. And the sanitation workers were mostly older men who had been displaced sharecroppers from the Mississippi Delta. So, to engage young readers, I made the protagonist a child. And lastly, I asked her what was the most challenging part of writing this book. And she says, I wrote the first draft in 2005. The book went through 6 or 7 iterations. It required 10 years to finally arrive that the solution was to make my protagonist a girl with a daddy and a mama who were committed to the freedom to fight by any means necessary. Sacrifice paves the road to shiny accomplishments. My father, Sergeant Kenneth Duncan, would say, no cross, no crown. Some key passages from this book are part of this. Um, she One of the things in there. Sorry, I'm like tripping over my words. Um, one of the quotes from the book is, "Each day my daddy marched for better pay. He marched for dignity. He marched for us." And I think this highlights the personal sacrifices that the striking workers and their families had to make for this movement. Um, the second one is Dr. King came to Memphis to speak for the strikers. He told them, we're saying that we're determined to be men. And I think that shows King's powerful rhetoric and support for economic justice. And then the last one, then on April 4th, Dr. King stood on a balcony at the Lorraine Motel and everything changed. And I think this highlights a moment of historical significance, marking the very tragic loss of King. Some article reviews that I have here, from the Starred Review. Uh, Someone says the author's choice is not to focus on singular efforts of King, but the dedicated efforts of community signals a deeply important lesson for young readers. And then the Zen Education Project highlights the significance of the Memphis sanitation worker strike by saying African American sanitation workers Ethel Cole and Robert Walker were crushed to death on February 1st, 1968. When the rain triggered the trash truck's compactor, their deaths, along with the racist treatment of the sanitation workers, led more than 1,100 workers to strike for better wages, conditions, and safety on February 12th, 1968. Now, here we have the mock strike negotiation, and these are some of the afterthoughts of that. I can also include a link tree where I can upload PDFs of the strike negotiation activity. I think it would be an amazing thing for any history class or English class covering the civil rights movement to do. Um, and that's all I got for you guys. Here is my works cited. And have a great rest of your day. I hope you enjoyed.